The Galactic Council called us barbarians. They called us dangerous. They never expected us to be this dangerous. Especially after they left us to die. Elysium Prime burned. Molten steel rained from the sky, each drop a funeral pyre for a shattered dream. The air, thick with the acrid stench of incinerated flora and promethium fuel, stung Nolan Adams' nostrils as he watched the carnage unfold from his hidden observation post. Grief, sharp and jagged, clawed at his throat, mingling with a simmering rage that threatened to consume him. He'd believed in the Council. He'd dedicated his life to their vision of a unified galaxy, a beacon of peace and prosperity. Now, that beacon was a funeral pyre. His fingers tightened around the activation rune on his datapad. Defensive systems integration. Planetary shield optimization. The ghosts of past projects flickered across his mind, each a testament to his naivete. He'd poured his heart into designs meant to protect, only to see them rendered useless by a calculated betrayal. A cracked screen flickered to life, displaying the garbled remnants of a galactic news network broadcast. Revocation of human protectorate status, resource allocation, shifting strategic priorities. The Council's sterile pronouncements echoed in the observation post, each word a fresh wound. Assessment of human adaptability, evolutionary stagnation. Nolan spat. Stagnation. They were watching Elysium Prime burn because of the Council's assessment. Below, the krill swarmed. Insectoid horrors, their chitinous exoskeletons gleaming in the firelight, unleashed a storm of bioengineered toxins. Their weapons, grotesque extensions of their own bodies, dissolved reinforced bunkers like acid on flesh. But even in the face of annihilation, the colonists fought. He watched as a group of farmers, wielding modified mining lasers and cobbled-together explosives, ambushed a krill patrol. Their movements were clumsy, their aim imperfect, but their purpose was absolute. They were dying, yes, but they were taking krill with them. The Council had underestimated them. They had underestimated humanity's will to survive. Static crackled through his comms, followed by a desperate, ragged voice. Adams, they're everywhere. We're holding them off, but we can't last. Make them pay. It was Sarah, commander of the Elysium Prime Defense Force, her voice fading in and out. He'd known her, respected her. Now she was just another casualty of the Council's indifference. He turned away from the window, his gaze falling upon a hidden cache tucked away in the corner of the observation post. Experimental technology. Advanced energy weapons and stealth systems. Projects he'd spearheaded before the Council deemed them too dangerous for mass production, too disruptive to the established galactic order. His fingers danced across the control panel, initiating the activation sequence. Power surged through the dormant systems, bathing the chamber in an eerie blue glow. He activated a personal distress beacon, sending a signal into the void. A futile gesture, perhaps, but driven by Sarah's last wish, and a desperate, burning need to make the Council regret their decision. A flicker on his radar. A lone contact approaching fast, an Elysian fighter, its energy signature was unusual. Then he saw it, the fighter's silhouette against the burning sky. It was damaged, limping. One wing was heavily scarred, almost non-existent, replaced by a crude, jury-rigged prosthetic. The Elysians, isolationists, distrustful of outsiders, especially humans. Why was one of them answering a distress call on a doomed planet? The krill detected the incoming fighter. Their swarm shifted, their attention turning towards the new threat. Alarms blared in the observation post. The Elysian fighter was fast, but it was outnumbered, outgunned. Nolan glanced back at the experimental energy weapon, its power core humming with hardly restrained energy. Flight or fight, run and hide or stand and deliver. Sarah's voice echoed in his mind. Make them pay. He picked up the weapon, its weight surprisingly comforting in his hands. He raised it, targeting the lead krill fighter, and squeezed the trigger. A beam of pure energy lanced out, obliterating the alien craft in a blinding flash. The experimental weapon's energy discharge rippled through the void, a brief, beautiful aurora that vaporized a Krill fighter in a silent flash. Before Nolan could celebrate, klaxons blared. "They know where we are," Nova barked, wrenching the fighter into a sharp turn. "Conserve power, Nolan. That weapon drains the core faster than I thought." He watched the energy levels plummet on the diagnostics display. She was right. Understood, no more free shots. Nova threaded the Elysian fighter through a chaotic debris field, a graveyard of shattered ships and pulverized asteroids. Her movements were fluid, almost instinctive. "They won't follow us in here. Krill pilots prefer open space, clean kills. They lack the finesse." Nolan braced against the turbulence. "Finesse? You're flying through space junk with a busted wing." He glanced at the power levels again, a knot forming in his stomach. "Shields are dropping fast. I can reroute power from life support and the comm system." "Do it," Nova confirmed, her voice tight. The artificial gravity flickered, and the hum of the life support faded to a whisper. "We need shields if we're going to make it to the moon." "Moon? What moon?" Nolan asked, rerouting the power. The fighter shuddered as the shields flickered back to life, a fragile barrier against the void. "Elysium Prime can't fix this," Nova said, gesturing to the mangled remains of her port wing with a flick of her head. "Not without weeks of work and resources we don't have. There's a repair facility, a hidden one, on a remote moon in this system, abandoned after the Krill pushed through this sector years ago." Nolan frowned. "A hidden repair facility? Why haven't I heard of it?" "Because the Council deemed it strategically irrelevant," Nova stated coldly, her grip tightening on the controls. "It's our only chance." As they approached the moon, its gray surface scarred by ancient impacts, a grim reality became apparent. A large Krill blockade orbited the desolate sphere, a network of patrol ships and heavy cruisers. "Damn it," Nolan breathed. "A blockade? How are we supposed to get through that?" "We have the experimental stealth system, don't we?" Nolan suggested. "It's not perfect, but it might give us a shot." Nova hesitated. "It's untested, unstable, but you're right, it's our only option." She engaged the stealth system. The fighter shimmered, bending light around it, becoming nearly invisible to the naked eye. "Prepare for turbulence. This is going to be rough." The stealth system sputtered and flickered, the ship momentarily visible before cloaking again. Red lights flashed on the console. "Energy fluctuations," Nolan shouted. "It's not holding steady." Nova wrestled with the controls, her face etched with concentration. "I'm compensating, but if they get a lock, we're done." Suddenly, a pulse of energy slammed into the fighter. Alarm screamed. "We've been hit. Shields are failing. The stealth system is offline." Nova fought to maintain control as the fighter spiraled towards the moon's surface. "Brace for impact." The crash was violent. Metal screeched against rock as the fighter skidded across the lunar surface, finally coming to rest in a cloud of dust and debris. "Report," Nova yelled, struggling to free herself from the wreckage. "Alive," Nolan groaned, pulling himself from his seat. "Mostly. Stealth system is fried. We're sitting ducks." They emerged from the wreckage to find themselves near the entrance to the repair facility, a gaping hole in the moon's surface. But the facility wasn't abandoned, not entirely. Krill drones, their mechanical bodies glinting in the dim light, swarmed the corridors. "Great," Nolan muttered, drawing his sidearm. "Infested." Nolan glanced at the remains of the experimental weapon. "I might be able to modify it, turn it into a portable defense system." He began stripping components, his hands moving with practiced speed. "I'll cover you," Nova said, drawing her plasma blade. Despite her injuries, her stance was solid, her eyes focused. She moved with a grace that belied her damaged wing. As Nolan worked, Nova engaged the Krill drones, her plasma blade flashing in the darkness. Each strike was precise, efficient. She was a whirlwind of deadly motion. A flicker of memory crossed her face, a burning ship, a desperate struggle, the searing pain as her wing was torn away by Krill fire. She blinked, pushing the memory aside, her focus returning to the present. Nolan finished his modifications, jury-rigging the experimental weapon into a shoulder-mounted cannon. Ready, limited ammo, but it should clear a path. They fought their way through the infested corridors, the modified weapon blasting apart drones with concentrated bursts of energy. Finally, they reached the main repair bay. It was a scene of devastation. Equipment lay scattered and broken. Control panels were smashed. Wires hung sparking from the ceiling. The machinery needed to repair Nova's wing had been deliberately sabotaged, its delicate components crushed beyond immediate repair. "No," Nova whispered, her voice filled with despair. "It's all useless." Before Nolan could respond, the ground trembled. A Krill dropship descended from the sky, its engines screaming, casting a long shadow over the ruined facility. The hatch hissed open, revealing a squad of heavily armed Krill warriors. The hunt had just begun. The whine of the Krill dropship faded into the cacophony of plasma fire. Dozens of heavily armed drones swarmed from its belly, their insectal forms a blur of motion as they targeted Nolan and Nova. Red energy bolts sizzled past, scorching the metal floor where Nolan had been standing moments before. He wrestled the modified experimental weapon into a firing position, its jury-rigged components groaning under the strain. The weapon, more a collection of scavenged parts than a proper energy cannon, spat a volatile stream of white-hot plasma. Each blast vaporized a drone with satisfying finality, carving a temporary safe zone in the swarm. But the weapon overheated quickly, forcing him to fire in controlled bursts. Nova, meanwhile, was a whirlwind of motion. She used the skeletal remains of the facility as cover, darting between support beams and overturned equipment. A series of timed plasma grenades detonated with concussive force, shredding clusters of drones caught in the tight corridors. She was drawing them in, making them chase her through the maze. Kill zones. The Krill drones were adapting. No longer charging in blindly, they began to coordinate their attacks. One group laid down suppressing fire, forcing Nolan to keep his head down, while another flanked Nova's position. The air crackled with energy as bolts slammed into the metal around him. He risked a glance and saw that the majority of the drones were focused on the repair bay entrance, their relentless fire chewing away at the blast doors. Whatever was inside, the Krill wanted it badly. "Nolan, fall back," Nova yelled, her voice strained. "They're pushing towards the bay." He needed to move to find a better vantage point. Scanning the perimeter, his eyes landed on a barely visible access panel half concealed behind a stack of crates. A maintenance tunnel. It was a long shot, but it was the only option he could see. "Nova, there's a tunnel," he shouted, firing a burst to cover his advance. "Go, I'll hold them." He turned to protest, but saw the relentless drive etched on her face. A searing blast ripped through the air, narrowly missing her head. She stumbled, clutching her side. He saw a dark stain blooming on her armor. "Go damn it, now," she roared. He didn't argue. He sprinted towards the access panel, ripped it open, and squeezed into the narrow, claustrophobic tunnel. The sounds of the firefight echoed behind him, each blast a reminder of Nova's sacrifice. The tunnel was dark and cramped, barely wide enough to crawl through. The air was thick with the smell of dust and decay. As he moved deeper, he noticed something was wrong. Sections of the tunnel wall were buckled and warped, the metal stressed and fractured. Then he saw it. A scorch mark, a clear indication of sabotage. Someone had deliberately weakened the structure. He reached the repair bay access point and found the door controls mangled, wires severed and components ripped out. This wasn't just damage from the initial attack. This was deliberate destruction. He accessed the facility's emergency data logs, his fingers flying across the damaged interface. After what felt like an eternity, a fragmented file appeared on the screen, a security log detailing the sabotage. The perpetrator, a rogue Elysian scientist named Lyra Navani. The log mentioned ties to the Galactic Council. He relayed the information to Nova over the comms. "Nova, I found something. The equipment wasn't just destroyed, it was sabotaged. The logs say an Elysian scientist named Lyra Navani was responsible. They say she has ties to the Council." There was a long pause. Then Nova's voice, tinged with disbelief, crackled in his ear. "Lyra Navani, I know that name. She disappeared a few months ago. She was investigating possible Krill collaboration with Council members." A tremor ran through the tunnel. Dust rained down from the ceiling. "Nalan, get out of there, the tunnel's collapsing." He didn't need to be told twice. He scrambled back through the tunnel, the metal groaning and twisting around him. The whole structure felt like it was about to give way. He burst out of the access panel, back into the repair bay. The scene that greeted him was a nightmare. Nova was surrounded by Krill drones, her movements sluggish, her breath ragged. Plasma fire chewed away at her armor. The tunnel entrance behind him had completely collapsed. They were trapped. Nova saw the despair in his eyes. "No point in dying quietly," she gasped, her voice barely audible above the din. "Activate the facility's distress beacon." He stared at her, stunned. "Are you crazy?" "That'll bring more Krill. It also sends a coded message to Elysian intelligence. It's a long shot, but it's our only chance to expose the Council." He didn't hesitate. He knew she was right. He raced to the emergency console, his fingers fumbling with the controls. He initiated the distress beacon. A high-pitched whine filled the air, followed by a burst of static. They barely managed to activate the beacon before the remaining Krill drones converged, their weapons blazing. Just as they thought they might be able to hold them off, a deeper, more guttural hum filled the air. The blast doors shuddered, then buckled inward with explosive force. A squadron of advanced Krill warriors strode into the repair bay, their armor gleaming, their weapons far more sophisticated than those of the drones. Leading them was a Krill commander, larger and more imposing than the rest, with unique markings etched into his carapace. The commander raised a hand, silencing the drone fire. He spoke, his voice a low growl, the words heavily accented but undeniably galactic basic. "Elysian, surrender and reveal the location of the artifact." Nova stiffened, her eyes widening in recognition. That voice. She whispered, her gaze fixed on the Krill commander. "You know him?" Nalan asked, his hand instinctively reaching for his sidearm. She didn't answer. Her expression was a mixture of shock and horror. "He already knows about the beacon, about the message," she breathed. "There's something deeper, even within my own ranks." Nalan glanced from Nova to the Krill commander, the weight of their situation crashing down on him. Captured, a new mysterious artifact to protect, and an even larger conspiracy within Elysian ranks made the odds seem insurmountable. The air crackled with energy as plasma bolts seared through the makeshift barricade, forcing Nalan and Nova to duck for cover. The Krill commander, a hulking figure clad in black armor, advanced with unnerving precision, his energy rifle spitting death. Around them, the research facility echoed with the screams of the dying and the relentless thud of Krill boots. "He's good," Nalan yelled over the din, firing a burst from his pulse rifle. The shots ricocheted harmlessly off the commander's energy shield. Nova, perched on a toppled equipment crate, returned fire with controlled bursts from her pistol. Each shot was aimed with deadly accuracy, forcing the commander to weave and dodge. The Krill commander, despite his seemingly impervious armor, paused, his insectoid eyes narrowing. "Elysian," he hissed, his voice a guttural rasp. "The rumors of your continued existence are irritating, even with your handicap." Nalan risked a glance. The Krill commander's surprise was palpable. He knew Nova. Her reputation preceded her, even here, even now. But what really caught Nalan's attention was the armor. Fragments of what looked undeniably like modified Elysian battle plate were integrated into the commander's suit. The same distinctive energy conduits, the same angular design. The Council's fingerprints were becoming clearer. He's after something specific, Nova said, her voice tight. She unleashed another volley of shots, keeping the commander pinned down. He's ignoring the artifact. He is focused on your modifications to the weapon. The Krill commander roared, swatting aside a chunk of falling debris. The AI, it belongs to the Krill by right of conquest. A chill ran down Nolan's spine. AI. The weapon he modified housed a deactivated AI core. This was far bigger than he imagined. During a brief lull in the fighting, the Krill commander lowered his weapon slightly. "Elysian," he said, his voice imbued with a disturbing calmness. "You know the value of what lies within that core. Information crucial to both our species. Information the Council desperately wants buried. Give me the AI and I will let the human live." Nova's face hardened. Her gaze flickered to Nolan, then back to the commander. "I will trade myself for the artifact, and for his freedom." Nolan stared at her, disbelief warring with a chilling understanding. "Nova, no, we do this together or not at all." He lunged forward, firing a concentrated burst at the commander's helmet. The shots overloaded the energy shield, causing it to flicker and die. The commander staggered back, momentarily stunned. Nova seized the opportunity, unleashing a barrage of plasma grenades. One hit its mark, detonating at the commander's feet. The Krill warrior howled in pain and fury. Nolan, adrenaline surging, grabbed a discarded energy rifle and aimed carefully. He fired a single, precise shot at the commander's wrist, severing the cable connecting his communication device to his armor. The device clattered to the floor, useless. No immediate reinforcements. As the commander roared, Nova winced. She felt a sudden vibration in her prosthetic arm. Frowning, she touched a hidden panel, revealing a concealed compartment. Inside, nestled in foam padding, was a data chip. She pulled it out, her fingers trembling. "Nolan," she said, her voice barely a whisper. I think I know what this is." She inserted the chip into a port on her prosthetic. A holographic display flickered to life, projecting a series of complex diagrams and encrypted text. It was a classified Elysian protocol designated Project Chimera. "The AI wasn't just an AI," she said, her voice hushed. "It was designed as a failsafe, a countermeasure against rogue council factions. It contains information that could expose their deepest secrets." Nolan's mind raced. The council wanted this buried. The Krill wanted it for themselves. Humanity was caught in the middle. "We need to get out of here," he said, his voice urgent. "There has to be a way to override the facility's automated defenses." They moved quickly, navigating the labyrinthine corridors, the sounds of battle echoing behind them. They reached the central control room, a shattered ruin of sparking wires and broken consoles. "Here," Nolan said, pointing to a damaged terminal. "If I can reroute the power." He worked feverishly, his fingers flying across the keyboard. Suddenly, the doors behind them burst open and a squad of Krill warriors stormed into the room, weapons blazing. "Go, I'll hold them off," Nolan shouted, grabbing his rifle. Nova hesitated for a moment, then nodded and sprinted towards a side corridor. She was on her own. Nolan fired relentlessly, taking down several Krill warriors before a plasma bolt grazed his side, sending him stumbling. He ignored the pain, focusing on the task at hand. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, he managed to bypass the security protocols. "Defense system online." He yelled into his comm, but there was no response from Nova. Suddenly, the lights flickered and a klaxon blared. The automated turrets, once dormant, sprang to life, their targeting systems whirring. But something was wrong, terribly wrong. The turrets weren't targeting the Krill. They were targeting everything. "Nova, get out of there. The system's corrupted." Nolan screamed into his comm, but again there was no response. Meanwhile, Nova, dodging laser fire and collapsing ceilings, stumbled upon a hidden bay. Inside, bathed in dim emergency lighting, was a single escape pod. Old, outdated, but functional. Nolan managed to shut down the defense system, the turrets falling silent. But as he turned, he found himself face to face with the Krill commander, his face contorted with rage. "You will pay for this, human," the commander snarled, raising his energy rifle. A searing pain ripped through Nolan's shoulder as a plasma bolt tore through his armor. He cried out, collapsing to his knees. The commander advanced, his weapon leveled at Nolan's head. Suddenly, a deafening roar filled the air. The wall behind the commander exploded inward, showering him with debris. Nova, piloting the escape pod, had smashed through the wall. The pod hovered precariously, its engine screaming. "Nolan, get in!" she yelled, her voice strained. Nolan scrambled to his feet, ignoring the pain in his shoulder. He stumbled towards the pod, Nova reaching out to pull him inside. The commander, momentarily stunned, recovered and raised his weapon. Nova hauled Nolan into the pod, slamming the hatch shut just as a plasma bolt slammed into the hull. Alarms blared as the escape pod launched into the darkness of space. The Krill commander watched in fury as the pod streaked away, disappearing into the void. Inside the escape pod, Nolan gasped for breath, clutching his wounded shoulder. Nova wrestled with the controls, her face grim. "Where are we going?" Nolan asked, his voice weak. Nova shook her head. "The navigation systems are heavily damaged. I don't know, anywhere but here." The stars wheeled around them, an endless, indifferent expanse. Their destination, unknown. And the acrid smell of burning circuits filled the cramped escape pod. A high-pitched whine pierced the air, punctuated by the frantic blinking of a red warning light. Oxygen levels, critical. Nolan gasped, his chest a searing pain from the Krill energy weapon. Nova, her movements precise and efficient, ripped open a panel revealing a medkit. "Hold still, Nolan," she commanded, her voice calm despite the urgency. She produced a biofoam applicator, its nozzle glowing with a soft blue light, and sprayed it across his chest wound. The foam hissed, instantly numbing the pain and sealing the singed flesh. He gritted his teeth, a wave of nausea washing over him. Her touch was surprisingly gentle, belying the warrior he knew her to be. Despite the throbbing in his chest, Nolan reached for a discarded panel, its edges jagged and sparking. "Navigation's fried," he rasped, his fingers already probing for usable components. "Gotta try to reroute something. Anything." He pried loose a capacitor, its casing cracked, and began stripping wires, ignoring the protesting shriek of the failing life support. A low, guttural hum vibrated through the hull. Nova's head snapped up, her eyes narrowed. Krill warship, direct intercept course. Her hand instinctively moved towards the energy pistol strapped to her thigh. Nolan cursed under his breath. He glanced at the flickering display, barely registering. "We're heading straight for the Xylos Nebula," he said, his voice strained. "Massive electromagnetic fields. Ships don't go in there unless they have a death wish." Nova's expression hardened. She accessed the Elysian data chip, her fingers flying across the interface. A holographic image flickered to life, a stern-faced Elysian warrior, her mentor. The message was encrypted, but Nova bypassed the security protocols with practiced ease. "The Council. Weaponizing the AI. Cannot be allowed. Seek sanctuary. Kepler 186F. Energy signature, unmatched." The image dissolved, leaving Nova staring blankly ahead, her prosthetic wing gleaming dully in the emergency light. "Kepler 186F, Nolan asked, his brow furrowed. "Never heard of it. What did she say about the Council?" Nova hesitated, her gaze distant. "A plot," she said finally, her voice low. "A plot to weaponize the very AI they claim to protect us with," she said, "to seek refuge." "Refuge in a nebula." Nolan gestured towards the viewport, where a swirling vortex of purple and green gas was beginning to dominate the view. "I have a better idea. Those electromagnetic fields. They'll scramble the Krill's sensors. We can use them to lose the warship." "Madness, Nolan," Nova retorted, her voice sharp. "We barely made it out of the battle. The nebula will tear us apart." Before Nolan could respond, a searing beam of energy slammed into the escape pod, throwing them both against the bulkhead. Sparks erupted from the control panel, and the engine sputtered and died. The emergency lights flickered violently, threatening to extinguish completely. "Engines are offline," Nova reported grimly. "Communications are down, they crippled us." Nolan coughed, his hand flying to his chest. "Reroute power," he gasped, his eyes fixed on the engine diagnostics. "Life support. To engines, temporary boost." "Nolan, no, you'll suffocate." "Better than krill hands," he wheezed, his fingers already manipulating the power conduits. The emergency lights dimmed further, casting long, dancing shadows across the cramped interior. The air grew noticeably thinner. He could feel his lungs burning. Nova gripped the controls, her fist clenched. "Brace yourself," she said, her voice tight with perseverance. She plunged the escape pod into the swirling chaos of the Xylos Nebula. The nebula was a symphony of destruction. Electromagnetic pulses slammed against the hull, rattling the escape pod like a child's toy. The sensors went haywire, displaying a chaotic jumble of colors and numbers. Outside, the swirling gases danced in a mesmerizing display of light and energy, beautiful and deadly. The krill warship followed, its movements becoming increasingly erratic as its sensors struggled to penetrate the electromagnetic interference. They twisted and turned, dodging rogue energy bolts and navigating through corridors of charged particles. The escape pod groaned under the strain, its metal screaming in protest. But Nova, her eyes fixed on the swirling chaos ahead, piloted with unwavering skill. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they emerged from the nebula, battered and bruised but alive. Nolan, his face pale and drawn, gasped for air as the life support system sputtered back to life. "Scanning." He croaked, his fingers trembling as he reactivated the long-range sensors. Uncharted planet. Within scanning range, small but there. Nova accessed the Elysian database. "The energy signature," she breathed, her eyes widening. "It matches. Kepler 186f is real." The escape pod, its power reserves critically low, began its descent. The planet grew larger in the viewport, a swirling mass of green and blue. As they entered the atmosphere, a powerful gravitational anomaly seized the escape pod, throwing it violently off course. Alarms blared, and the hull groaned under immense pressure. The last thing Nolan saw was a wall of green rushing towards them before everything went black. The escape pod slammed into the planet's surface with bone-jarring force. Metal shrieked, glass shattered, and the world spun violently before coming to a jarring halt. When Nolan finally regained consciousness, he was hanging upside down, suspended by his safety harness. The escape pod was a mangled wreck, half buried in dense vegetation. He unbuckled the harness and dropped to the floor with a thud. Nova was already moving, assessing the damage. "We're down," she said grimly. "Hard." He followed her out of the wreckage, stumbling into a world unlike anything he had ever seen. Bioluminescent flora illuminated the dense jungle, casting an eerie, otherworldly glow. Strange, unsettling sounds echoed through the trees, clicks, whistles, and guttural growls that sent a shiver down his spine. They were alive but stranded. And they were definitely not alone. Nolan cursed under his breath fogging in the humid air as he wrestled with a mangled power cell. "Damn krill tech," he muttered, wrenching the casing open. Sparks flew as he bypassed a fried circuit. He managed to salvage a few intact capacitors and a functional energy regulator. Adding them to the small pile of components he'd managed to scavenge from the escape pod's wreckage. Nova, her face grim, surveyed the dense jungle canopy with a practiced eye. The air hung thick with the scent of decaying vegetation and something else, something acrid and metallic. "Multiple life forms detected approximately 300 meters to the east," she reported, her voice calm despite the evident tension, "and an unusual energy signature emanating from the west. High concentration, source unknown." Nolan glanced up, wiping sweat from his brow. "What kind of energy?" "Unfamiliar," Nova replied, her brow furrowed. "But technologically advanced." possibly dangerous. She winced slightly, touching her left shoulder. Nolan moved to her side, his expression softening. "Let me see that." He gently peeled back the remnants of her flight suit, revealing a jagged wound where shrapnel had torn through her flesh. Elysian physiology was different. Their blood was a viscous, iridescent fluid, and their bone structure was denser than human. He applied a synthesized sealant from his medkit, the wound hissing as it cauterized. "Lucky it missed your primary circulatory pathways. You'll live." Nova nodded, her gaze unwavering. "The energy signature. It resonates with something deep within the Elysian matrix. I don't understand it, but it feels ancient." Before Nolan could respond, a chorus of guttural growls echoed through the jungle. Bioluminescent eyes blinked into existence in the undergrowth, revealing a pack of creatures unlike anything Nolan had ever seen. They were reptilian, with razor-sharp claws and phosphorescent markings that pulsed with an eerie light. "Predators," Nova stated, drawing her plasma pistol. "Highly aggressive." The creatures lunged, their claws tearing through the air. Nova moved with blinding speed, firing precise bursts of plasma that incinerated two of the attackers. Nolan scrambled for a piece of twisted metal, wielding it as a makeshift club. One of the creatures leaped at him, its jaws snapping. He sidestepped the attack and brought the metal bar down on its skull with a sickening crunch. Nova dispatched several more, her movements a blur of lethal efficiency. She noticed something. Their auditory canals. Exposed, they are sensitive to high-frequency sounds. "Got it," Nolan grunted, dodging another attack. He rummaged through his salvaged components, his mind racing. "Energy regulator, capacitor, I can rig something." Working quickly, he spliced wires and adjusted settings, creating a crude sonic emitter. As the creatures closed in, he activated the device. A piercing, high-pitched whine filled the air. The creatures recoiled, their bioluminescent markings flickering erratically. They clawed at their heads, their growls turning into pained whimpers. "Temporary," Nova warned, firing another shot. "It will only deter them for a short time." They pressed forward, deeper into the jungle, leaving the disoriented creatures behind. After a few minutes, Nolan and Nova stumbled upon a narrow, overgrown pathway, barely visible beneath the dense vegetation. Ancient, gnarled roots twisted across the path, hinting at its age. Nova paused, her hand resting on the hilt of her pistol. "I sense a presence," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "Watching us, intelligent." Nolan felt a prickle of unease on the back of his neck. He reactivated the damaged scanner he'd been working on, its screen flickering erratically. After a few tense moments, the signal stabilized. "I'm getting a reading," he announced, his voice tight. "A structure, non-native origin. Approximately 5 kilometers to the west." They continued along the path, the jungle growing increasingly strange and alien. They entered a clearing filled with crystalline plants that shimmered with an internal light. As they moved deeper into the field, Nolan's scanner sputtered and died. Nova's pistol flickered, then went dark. Electromagnetic interference, Nolan realized, examining one of the crystalline plants. It pulsed with a soft blue light. He ran a diagnostic, his eyes widening. These plants, they're absorbing and redirecting energy. Incredible. Nova stared at the field. There are stories from Elysian lore of a planet used as a research lab by a precursor civilization. A place where they experimented with energy and life itself. They emerged from the field and saw it. A partially buried, dome-shaped structure dominated the landscape. Alien glyphs covered its surface, glowing faintly in the dim light. As they approached, a section of the dome shimmered, and a holographic projection flickered to life. A series of complex symbols danced in the air, accompanied by a low, resonant hum. Nolan pulled out a handheld translator, its screen displaying a jumble of gibberish. He adjusted the settings, his fingers flying across the controls. After a moment, a few words flickered into focus. "Warning, unauthorized access, containment breach." The message repeated in a loop. He focused on the key phrases: Galactic, Council, Project, Genesis. Suddenly, the ground began to tremble. A section of the dome slid open, revealing a dark, yawning entrance. A wave of palpable energy washed over them, raising the hairs on Nolan's arms. Nova's eyes widened. The energy signature. It's intensifying, whatever is in there. It's what the Krill want. Nolan met Nova's gaze, his expression grim but determined. He knew, with a chilling certainty, that whatever lay within that dome was far more dangerous than anything they had faced so far. A high-pitched whine cut through the air. Above them, a Krill scout ship decloaked, its engines flaring as it initiated atmospheric entry. Nolan shouldered the sonic emitter, its weight a small comfort against the gnawing unease in his gut. Nova gestured, her eyes scanning the darkness beyond the archway. He nodded, took a breath, and stepped through. They found themselves in a vast, circular chamber. The air hung thick and cold, carrying a metallic tang that stung Nolan's nostrils. Strange, towering structures of polished obsidian ringed the room, their purpose utterly alien. Cables snaked across the floor, disappearing into the walls like metallic vines. It felt less like a laboratory and more like the inside of some colossal, dormant machine. A low hum resonated through the chamber, growing in intensity. Light blossomed from unseen sources, bathing the room in an eerie, blue-tinged glow. As the light strengthened, the walls became visible, revealing a tapestry of glyphs far more intricate and complex than anything they'd seen before. They swirled and intertwined, an alien language that seemed to writhe before his eyes. Nolan set to work, his decryption device humming as it scanned the glyphs. Fragments of meaning flickered across the screen: research, species modification, containment. The dome, it seemed, was a research facility, a place where the laws of nature were bent and broken. Nova moved silently along the periphery of the chamber, her hand resting on the hilt of her energy blade. She stopped abruptly before a shimmering holographic display that had flickered to life. Images rotated slowly, grotesque dissections, invasive procedures, species from across the galaxy strapped to tables. And then a human, a young woman, her eyes wide with terror as metallic tendrils probed her skull. Nolan felt a surge of nausea. He stumbled towards Nova, his blood running cold. The display shifted, revealing schematics and data logs. A symbol, the sigil of the Galactic Council, was prominently displayed alongside another, more sinister emblem, the three-pronged claw of the Krill. They were working together, Nova hissed, her voice tight with fury. The Council and the Krill. Nolan tore his gaze from the horrifying images, focusing back on his decryption. The glyphs spoke of genetic manipulation, bioweapon development, projects with names like Chimera and Nemesis. The dome wasn't just a research lab, it was a breeding ground for horrors. Nova pointed to a specific sequence of glyphs. Krill Enhancement Program, she translated, her voice grim. The Krill are looking for this too. It's why they're here. The realization slammed into Nolan like a physical blow. The dome wasn't just a repository of forgotten science. It was a treasure trove of advanced technology and dangerous secrets, secrets that both the Krill and the Council clearly wanted to keep hidden. And now they were caught in the middle. A klaxon blared, shattering the silence. Red lights flashed, bathing the chamber in a crimson glow. Energy barriers slammed down, sealing off the exits. The hum intensified, morphing into a high-pitched whine. Security system, Nova yelled, drawing her blade. Activated. They were trapped. The chamber transformed into a maze of energy grids and automated turrets. Laser beams sliced through the air, forcing them to dive for cover behind the obsidian structures. Nolan, despite his lack of combat training, moved with surprising agility, his mind racing to find a solution. Nova, a whirlwind of motion, deflected laser fire with her blade, her movements fluid and deadly. Her Elysian agility was on full display as she leaped and dodged, a stark contrast to Nolan's frantic scrambling. The automated defenses were relentless, a constant barrage of energy that threatened to overwhelm them. "I can reroute the power," Nolan shouted, spotting a panel on one of the obsidian structures. He scrambled towards it, dodging a hail of laser fire. His fingers flew across the interface, bypassing security protocols and rerouting energy flows. A section of the energy grid flickered and died, creating a temporary opening. "Now!" Nolan yelled. Nova surged forward, her blade a blur, disabling a turret before it could realign. They sprinted through the opening, diving into a narrow corridor just as the energy grid reactivated. The corridor twisted and turned, a labyrinth of metallic walls and flickering lights. They pressed on, deeper into the dome until they reached a hidden chamber. Inside, bathed in a soft green light, stood a stasis pod. Within the pod, suspended in a viscous fluid, was a krill warrior. But this was no ordinary krill. It was larger, more muscular, its chitinous armor thicker and more menacing. Its eyes, visible even through the fluid, glowed with an unnatural intensity. Nolan reached out, his hand hovering over the pod's activation panel. "Don't touch it," Nova warned, but it was too late. His fingers brushed against a sensor and the pod hissed, the green light intensifying. The fluid drained away and the krill warrior's eyes snapped open. It roared, a sound that vibrated through the chamber, and slammed its fist against the pod's transparent wall. The wall shattered and the mutated krill warrior lunged out, its claws dripping with the remnants of the stasis fluid. This krill was unlike anything they had faced before. Larger, faster, stronger. Its senses were heightened, its movements almost preternaturally quick. It was a killing machine designed for one purpose: annihilation. The mutated krill roared, a sound that echoed through the dome, and charged. Nova met it head on, her blade flashing, but even her skill was no match for the krill's raw power. Nolan scrambled back, desperately searching for a weapon. "These are krill warriors," Nova grunted, deflecting a blow that would have shattered her ribs. "The council intervened because of these. They were too dangerous." Nolan remembered the sonic emitter. It was designed to disrupt the krill's communication, but perhaps, if he modified it, increased its range and power. He scrambled for the emitter, his fingers flying across the controls. He needed more power, more range. He ripped out a power cell from a nearby console, jury-rigging it to the emitter. A tremor shook the dome. Outside, the unmistakable sound of a krill scout ship descending. They had detected the energy signature, the activated warrior. Reinforcements were on their way. The mutated krill slammed Nova against a wall, the impact cracking her prosthetic wing. Nolan fired the modified sonic emitter. A wave of sonic energy washed over the mutated krill, causing it to stagger and clutch its head in pain. It was enough. They retreated, wounded and battered, deeper into the dome, just as the ramp of the krill scout ship slammed down, and a squad of heavily armed krill soldiers poured into the chamber. The screech of krill weaponry echoed through the corridor as Nolan slammed the blast doors shut, the heavy metal shuddering against the impacts. "Left." Nova barked, already moving, her Elysian grace a stark contrast to the krill's brutish advance. She flowed through the shadows, her dark uniform blending seamlessly with the dimly lit corridors. Nolan, less subtly, triggered a series of magnetic clamps, sending a stack of discarded equipment tumbling into the pursuing krill. He caught up with Nova at a junction. "This dome's a maze," he gasped, sweat stinging his eyes. "Any ideas?" "Elysian training," she replied, a hint of a smirk playing on her lips. "They taught us how to disappear. Follow me." She moved with a fluid confidence, her prosthetic wing a dark silhouette against the flickering emergency lights. They slipped through maintenance hatches, crawled through ventilation shafts, and used the dome's complex architecture to their advantage, becoming ghosts in the machine. Nolan, meanwhile, rerouted power conduits, sending bursts of electricity down corridors, momentarily stunning their pursuers. They reached a reinforced door marked Sector Command. Nolan bypassed the lock with practiced ease, the panel hissing open to reveal a darkened control room. Banks of monitors flickered with static. "Jackpot," he muttered, activating the system. The screens flickered to life, displaying grainy surveillance footage of the dome. They watched as Krill soldiers systematically searched sector after sector, their movements precise and methodical. "They're not just looking for us," Nolan observed, zooming in on a group of Krill converging on a data storage vault. "They're after something specific." He brought up the vault's manifest. "Data core, enhancement program, what is that?" Nova's expression darkened. "I've heard whispers. Old rumors, the council tried to bury it. A Krill super soldier project. Unspeakable experiments." "Experiments? What kind?" "Genetic manipulation, augmentation. They were trying to create the ultimate warrior." A chilling realization dawned on Nolan. "That thing we fought earlier, the mutated Krill, it's a prototype." An alarm blared through the control room as the reinforced door buckled under sustained fire. "They found us," Nova yelled, already moving. "We need to go." As they fled, Nolan ripped a damaged datapad from a console, shoving it into his pocket. Sparks flew as the door burst open, Krill soldiers flooding the room, their weapons raised. They exchanged fire, Nova's shots precise and deadly, before retreating down a narrow service corridor. They found themselves in a grimy tunnel, the air thick with the smell of ozone and decay. "This leads to an underground maintenance facility," Nolan said, consulting a faded schematic. "Filled with deactivated drones and outdated equipment. Might be something we can use." The facility was a graveyard of forgotten technology. Hulking drones lay dormant, their metallic bodies coated in dust. Cables snaked across the floor and the air hummed with residual energy. Nolan's eyes lit up. "Potential," he breathed, heading towards a small, cloaked maintenance drone. "This little guy might just save our lives." He worked quickly, rerouting power, bypassing damaged circuits and cannibalizing parts from other drones. Within minutes, the maintenance drone flickered to life, its optical sensors glowing with renewed energy. "Modified for reconnaissance and defense," Nolan announced, handing the control interface to Nova. She sent the drone ahead, its cloaking field rendering it invisible to the naked eye. The drone relayed images back to the interface. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber containing the dome's power generator. Krill patrols were present, but their focus seemed to be on securing the generator itself. Suddenly, a heat signature flared on the drone's sensors, the mutated Krill warrior, its movements eerily fast and precise, closing in on their location. "It's tracking us," Nova said grimly. "Somehow it knows where we are." Nolan's brow furrowed. "Wait a minute. Nova, you said the enhancement program involved genetic manipulation. What if they used Elysian DNA?" Nova stared at him, her eyes widening. "That's impossible. The Council would never." "But if they did," Nolan pressed, "it would explain its enhanced abilities, and why it's so fixated on you. Your Elysian DNA is resonating with it." "Then we need to end this," Nova said, her voice hardening with willpower. "I have a plan." "What is it?" "We overload the power generator. It will create a massive surge, disable the dome's security systems, and hopefully fry that thing." Nolan nodded. "Risky, but it's our best shot. I can reroute the power flow, but I'll need time." They moved quickly through the tunnel, reaching the generator room. The air crackled with energy, and the hum of the massive generator vibrated through the floor. Nolan began working frantically, rerouting power conduits, his fingers flying across the control panel. Suddenly, the mutated Krill warrior burst through the doorway, its eyes burning with predatory hunger. It lunged at Nova, its claws dripping with viscous fluid. "Go, I'll hold it off," Nova yelled, drawing her plasma blade. The battle was a blur of motion. Nova, despite her prosthetic wing, fought with a ferocity born of desperation. She danced around the Krill warrior's attacks, her blade deflecting its claws. Her prosthetic wing, augmented with hidden energy emitters, gave her unexpected bursts of speed and leverage. She landed a blow on the Krill warrior's arm, severing a tendon. Nalan, sweat pouring down his face, banged his head on the final control, rerouting the power flow. Now, he screamed. A massive surge of energy ripped through the generator room, bathing everything in blinding light. The generator screamed, its circuits overloading. The mutated Krill warrior roared in agony as bolts of electricity arced across its body. The dome shuddered, the lights flickered and died, plunging everything into darkness. Then silence. Nalan stumbled to his feet, coughing. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and burning metal. He saw Nova lying on the floor, her prosthetic wing sparking, her face contorted in pain. "Nova!" he cried, rushing to her side. The last thing he saw before darkness consumed him was the mutated Krill warrior, its charred body twitching amidst the wreckage. The dome was down, the Krill ship was dead, but at what cost? Dust and debris raining down as they stumbled, Nalan shoving Nova ahead of him. The power generator, overloaded beyond its capacity, had finally ruptured. A wave of heat washed over them, followed by the concussive force of the explosion. Twisted metal shrieked, and the air crackled with discharged energy. They lurched into a section of the maintenance facility, half buried beneath a collapsed support beam, the air thick with the acrid smell of ozone and burning plasteel. A flickering emergency light cast long, distorted shadows, revealing a scene of devastation. It offered a modicum of shielding, but for how long? Nalan knelt beside Nova, his hands hovering over her. "Nova, are you all right?" She coughed, spitting out a fleck of molten metal. I'll live." But her voice was strained, and Nalan could see the grimace etched on her face. He ran a diagnostic scan with his wrist-mounted device, the results flashing across the screen in rapid succession. "Your wing. The prosthetic took another hit, structural damage, and I'm reading elevated neural activity around the interface points. You need immediate attention." Nova waved a hand dismissively, wincing as the movement jarred her injured wing. "The data pad, is it intact?" Nalan retrieved the battered device from where he dropped it during their escape. The screen was cracked, but it still powered on, displaying a scrambled mess of encrypted code. "Barely, but it's still broadcasting a signal. We need to get this data decrypted, Nova. It's our only lead." "Then that is the priority." Nova's voice was terse. Nalan hesitated. "Your wing can wait." He knew better. He quickly scavenged for medical supplies amongst the debris, his eyes scanning for anything that could help. He found a discarded medkit, its contents mostly depleted, but he managed to salvage a tube of neural gel and a pressure bandage. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. Working quickly, he applied the gel to the damaged interface points on her wing, then secured the bandage tightly around the damaged section, improvising a splint with a piece of twisted metal. "This will stabilize it for now, but it's a temporary fix. We need to get you to a proper medical facility." "Later," Nova insisted, her gaze fixed on the data pad. "The decryption. Can you bypass the security protocols?" Nalan shook his head. "The encryption is Elysian grade. It requires a unique decryption key, one that's linked directly to your neural interface." Nova's expression hardened. "Then I will interface with it." "Nova, that's insane. Your nervous system is already overloaded. Interfacing with the data pad in your condition could cause permanent damage." "The information on that pad could save lives, Nalan, perhaps even yours," she retorted, her voice infused with steel. "The Krill, they knew too much, about our defenses, about our strategies. Someone gave them that information. That pad will tell us who." Nalan stared at her, seeing the tenacity in her eyes. He knew he couldn't dissuade her. He just wished there was another way. "All right. But I'm staying right here. If your vitals drop, I'm pulling the plug." He carefully positioned the data pad in front of Nova, then began the delicate process of connecting the interface cables to her neural ports. As the connection was established, Nova gasped, her body arching in pain. Sweat beaded on her forehead and her prosthetic wing twitched violently. "Nova, I can stop this. Now." Nalan's voice was imbued with concern. "No," she gasped. "Almost there." Fragments of encrypted data began to flicker across the screen, slowly resolving into coherent text. The process was agonizingly slow, each decrypted line of code a victory hard won. "I'm seeing references to the Krill enhancement program," Nalan said, his voice tight with anticipation. "But there's something else, a location, a council research facility." Nova's eyes widened. "That facility, I know it. It was supposedly destroyed years ago after a classified incident." "Destroyed or covered up," Nalan muttered, his mind racing. "They deliberately hid their involvement in the Krill enhancement program." A low, guttural growl echoed through the maintenance facility. The Krill were closing in, drawn by the energy signature from the data pad. "They're here," Nova whispered, her voice barely audible. Nalan acted quickly, grabbing a cloaked maintenance drone from a nearby charging station. "We need a diversion." He swiftly reprogrammed the drone, modifying its energy signature to mimic the data pads. "This should buy us some time." He launched the drone into a nearby corridor, its cloaking device masking its presence as it sped away. As the Krill pursued the decoy, Nalan and Nova returned to the data pad, their fingers flying across the damaged interface. More data fragments materialized, revealing a partial list of council members who had authorized the Krill enhancement program. Names of species and worlds flashed across the screen as more data was revealed. Each name was a hammer blow. Nova's breathing became shallow and ragged. Her body trembled uncontrollably. I can't. Just a little further, Nova. We're almost there." With a final surge of adrenaline, Nova focused her will, pushing herself beyond her limits. A final file materialized on the screen, a direct communication log between a high-ranking council member and the Krill Supreme Commander. The first few lines were corrupted, but the next few were clear as day. "Ensure the fall of humanity. Acceptable losses. New galactic order." Then, with a final shudder, the data pad went dark, its memory circuits fried from the overload. "No." Nalan cried out in frustration. Nova slumped against him, unconscious. The screech of tearing metal echoed through the facility as the Krill broke through their defenses. Nalan scooped Nova into his arms and fled, knowing that they now possessed information that could shatter the Galactic Council, and that the Council wanted them dead. They had been left to die, pre-planned. The Krill drones clicked and whirred, their multifaceted eyes glinting in the dim light as they rounded the corner. Nalan and Nova sprinted down the narrow corridor, the metallic tang of coolant thick in the air. "Left," Nova gasped, her voice strained. "Maintenance Junction Gamma 7. Nalan didn't hesitate. He slammed his hand against a control panel, rerouting power from the facility's automated cleaning systems. The lights flickered, plunged into darkness for a heart-stopping second, then sputtered back on at half intensity. "That'll slow them," he said, though he knew it wouldn't be enough. "Elevator access. Sector 4, Nova said, her breath hitching. She leaned heavily against the wall, her face pale. My wing." Nalan glanced at her. Sweat beaded on her brow and her hand clutched at her side where the prosthetic wing joined her flesh. "Can you make it?" "Have to," she gritted out. "It's the only way up." They reached the elevator access, a grimy, utilitarian alcove dominated by a single, battered service elevator. The doors were fused shut and sparks danced around the control panel. "Great," Nalan muttered. "Just great." He pried open the panel, revealing a tangle of wires and corroded circuits. "It's a fried regulator," he said, tracing the damage with his finger. "Need a Type 7 gravitic regulator, damn it." He slammed the panel shut. "Of course, it's the one component that's always missing." A guttural growl echoed down the corridor. The Krill were close, too close. Then a new sound, deeper and more menacing, joined the chorus of clicks and whirs. Footsteps, heavy and deliberate, announced the arrival of something far more dangerous. A figure emerged from the shadows, a Krill hunter unit leader, clad in obsidian armor and wielding a weapon that pulsed with contained energy. Its mandibles clicked in what Nolan could only interpret as satisfaction. This wasn't just a drone, this was a predator. The leader raised a gauntlet and two small, spider-like devices detached and scuttled along the floor. Tracking beacons. Nolan cursed under his breath. "We need to move," Nova said, her voice tight with pain. Nolan ripped a panel off a nearby conduit, exposing a mess of wires and pipes. "Maybe I can." He rummaged through his pack, pulling out a multi-tool. MacGyver something. He began stripping wires, his fingers working with frantic speed. Nova gasped, clutching at her wing. The pain was etched on her face. "Nolan, I can't." "Just breathe," he said, his voice sharper than he intended. "I need you to breathe." The hunter unit leader's heavy footfalls echoed closer. "Almost, almost," Nolan muttered, soldering a wire with a makeshift iron. He spliced the salvaged components together, creating a jury-rigged regulator. It looked like a disaster waiting to happen. Suddenly Nova cried out, a sharp, piercing sound. She crumpled to the ground, clutching her prosthetic wing. It's seizing." Nolan dropped the regulator. He knelt beside her, his face etched with concern. "Nova, what is it?" The connection points," she gasped. "They're rejecting it." The hunter unit leader rounded the corner, its weapon raised. Nolan grabbed the makeshift regulator. "Hold on," he yelled. He jammed the regulator into the elevator panel, sparks flying. The elevator doors groaned, shuddered, and slowly began to grind open, revealing a dark, flooded shaft. Water sloshed around their ankles as they scrambled inside. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and decay. The Krill hunter unit advanced, unfazed by the water. Thinking fast, Nolan ripped a live wire from the panel and plunged it into the water. The water crackled and hissed, and several of the Krill drones convulsed and fell, their circuits fried. The hunter unit leader, however, simply raised its weapon and fired a precise energy blast. The wire vaporized and the electrical field collapsed. "Damn it!" Nolan shouted. Nova, despite her pain, pushed herself to her feet. She drew her plasma blade, the blue energy humming in the confined space. Her movements were slower, more labored than before, but her eyes still burned with defiance. The Krill leader stalked forward, its weapon trained on Nolan. Nova lunged, her blade a blur of blue light. The Krill leader sidestepped the attack with surprising agility, then slammed the butt of its weapon into Nova's prosthetic wing. Nova screamed, a raw, animal sound of agony. Her legs buckled and she collapsed, her prosthetic twisted at an unnatural angle. Nolan roared in fury. He grabbed a discarded data pad from the floor, its screen cracked and flickering. He knew it was damaged, unstable. A desperate idea formed in his mind. He activated the facility's self-destruct sequence, inputting the override code with trembling fingers. A klaxon blared and red lights flashed. The Krill leader paused, its mandibles clicking in what sounded like annoyance. It raised its weapon and fired a burst of energy at the control panel. A section of the ceiling slammed shut, sealing off the corridor. "Countermeasure initiated," the leader's synthesized voice boomed. "Self-destruct contained." They were trapped. As the Krill hunter unit closed in, Nolan noticed the data pad in his hand was growing hot. Too hot. The battery was failing. It was about to explode. With a desperate heave, he hurled the data pad into a nearby ventilation shaft. A split second later, the data pad detonated, the force of the explosion ripping through the ventilation system. The blast cleared the Krill hunters from the elevator shaft, but it also sheared the cables holding the elevator car in place. The car lurched violently, then plunged downwards, the mangled remains of the makeshift regulator and fried wiring raining down on them. Their only escape route was gone. Trapped, injured, and facing a relentless enemy, Nolan and Nova braced themselves as the Krill hunter unit, bolstered by reinforcements, advanced into the water-filled elevator shaft, their weapons charged and ready. The grinding shriek of metal tearing echoed through the damaged section as the Krill hunter unit breached the weakened wall. Dust and debris rained down, illuminated by the crimson glow of their visors. The leader, a hulking figure with jagged carapace plating, gestured with a clawed hand, signaling the remaining hunters to advance cautiously into the dimly lit corridor. Bioluminescent moss clung to the walls, casting eerie shadows that danced with the falling dust. Nova, her breath ragged, felt a sharp pain lance through her injured wing with every movement, but her Elysian senses remained sharp. She noticed the precarious state of the ceiling above the krill. With a grunt of effort, she shifted her weight, dislodging a cascade of loose rock and debris. The small rockslide crashed down, momentarily hindering the krill, their guttural snarls of frustration barely audible over the din. Nalan, his eyes constantly scanning, saw the krill leader's attention fixed on Nova. He seized the opportunity. Darting behind a fallen support beam, he scavenged a discarded energy cell from a downed krill hunter. The casing was cracked, sparking intermittently, but the core still pulsed with a dangerous energy. The krill leader, its multifaceted eyes narrowing, barked an order. The hunters shifted their focus, their weapons realigning towards Nalan. They recognized the human as the greater threat, his ingenuity a more dangerous weapon than Nova's raw combat skill. Ignoring the throbbing ache in his ribs, Nalan jammed the salvaged energy cell against a severed power conduit. The cell vibrated violently in his hands. He muttered a quick prayer, then twisted the damaged casing. A high-pitched whine escalated into a deafening roar as the cell overloaded. A concussive blast ripped through the corridor, throwing krill hunters against the walls. The air shimmered with heat, the stench of ozone stinging Nalan's nostrils. Using the chaos as cover, Nova crawled towards a narrow opening, a maintenance tunnel previously overlooked in the krill's brutal efficiency. It was barely wide enough to accommodate her, but it offered a chance. Nalan stumbled after her, his ears ringing. He helped her squeeze into the narrow passage, then frantically began piling debris against the entrance, shattered plasteel, twisted metal, anything to buy them precious minutes. "It won't hold them for long," he gasped, his lungs burning. Inside the cramped tunnel, the air was thick with the smell of dust and decay. Nova ran her hand along the cold, damp wall. "These symbols," she said, her voice hushed, "they are Elysian. This tunnel, it predates this entire facility." The grinding sound of krill claws tearing through metal echoed closer. The barricade was failing. "We have to move," Nalan urged, his hand resting on the plasma pistol he'd salvaged. They pressed deeper into the tunnel system, the darkness swallowing them whole. The passage twisted and turned, leading them into a hidden chamber. Deactivated Elysian security drones stood like silent sentinels, their metallic bodies covered in a thick layer of dust. "Drones," Nalan breathed, a flicker of hope igniting in his eyes. He rushed to a nearby console, his fingers flying across the corroded surface. "If I can just get them online." But the screen remained dark. "Power systems offline, needs a complex bypass." Nova stared at the drones, her breathing shallow. Images flashed through her mind, a training exercise, a stern instructor, the feel of the drone's controls in her hands. A hidden memory buried deep within her subconscious. She gasped, clutching her head. The barricade shattered. Krill hunters poured into the tunnel, their weapons spitting bolts of plasma. Nalan raised his pistol, firing wildly, forcing them to take cover. "Nalan!" Nova cried, her voice strained. There, the control panel, hidden behind the stasis unit. Ignoring the searing pain in his side, Nalan scrambled towards the indicated location. Krill plasma bolts sizzled past his head, melting the metal around him. He reached the stasis unit, his fingers fumbling for the hidden release. With a click, a panel slid open, revealing a series of glowing glyphs. He didn't understand the language, but he recognized the power conduits. He ripped out the damaged wires and rerouted them, bypassing the damaged circuits. A surge of energy coursed through the chamber. The Elysian drones flickered to life, their blue optics glowing with renewed power. The Krill hunters recoiled in surprise. The reactivated drone swiveled, targeting the Krill hunters with pinpoint accuracy. Energy beams sliced through the air, vaporizing armor and flesh. The chamber erupted in chaos as the Krill struggled to defend themselves against the sudden onslaught. But the Krill leader was relentless. It moved with terrifying speed and precision, disabling the drones one by one. Energy blasts ripped through their metallic bodies, reducing them to sparking heaps of scrap. As the last drone sputtered and died, the Krill leader turned its attention to Nalan. It stalked towards him, its weapon raised, its multifaceted eyes burning with cold fury. Before Nalan could react, Nova lunged forward, throwing herself in front of him. The Krill leader's plasma blast struck her full force. She cried out in pain and collapsed, unconscious, to the floor. The Krill leader, satisfied that the Elysian was dead, grabbed Nalan by the arm and dragged him away. He struggled, but his strength was no match for the alien's brute force. As he was pulled away, Nalan's gaze fell upon the maintenance tunnel they had crawled through. He noticed something he had missed before. The tunnel continued, branching off towards the ventilation shaft. The same ventilation shaft where the data pad had exploded. A glimmer of hope flickered in his chest amidst the despair. Nalan's boots scraped against the metal floor as he was dragged through the dimly lit corridor, the rough grip of Krill hands digging into his arms. The air hung thick with the metallic tang of blood and the acrid stench of ozone. Amidst the cacophony of guttural Krill vocalizations, a high-pitched whine cut through the noise, a communication frequency. Nalan, despite the pain throbbing in his head, recognized it. It was a modulation he'd seen flickering on the data pad's diagnostic screen, a tight band burst transmission, encrypted with layers of obfuscation. The Krill leader, a hulking brute with chitinous armor scarred from countless battles, shoved Nalan into a grimy chamber. The leader gestured violently, a series of harsh clicks and guttural growls punctuated by broken phrases of galactic standard. Information, facility, defenses. The Krill punctuated each word with a jab of a clawed finger against Nalan's chest, each touch a painful reminder of his predicament. Nalan groaned, letting his body slump further against the wall. He feigned disorientation, blinking slowly as if struggling to focus. But beneath the act, his mind raced. He needed to buy time, assess his surroundings, and glean every possible detail about the Krill's operation. The pain was a useful mask, blurring his true intentions. The Krill, seemingly satisfied with Nalan's apparent weakness, dragged him to a makeshift holding cell. It was once a storage room, now crudely reinforced with blast shields and pulsating energy bars. Beyond the cell, the facility had been transformed into a Krill command center. Makeshift consoles were wired into the existing systems, their crude interfaces a stark contrast to the sleek, human designs. Nalan watched as Krill warriors, their multifaceted eyes glowing with predatory intensity, accessed data terminals. They seemed to be cross-referencing tactical information, human fleet deployments, defensive strategies, even Elysian combat doctrines. The speed at which they processed this information was alarming, their movements precise and efficient. Flashback. Nova lay still within the Elysian chamber, bathed in the soft, ethereal glow of the crystalline structures. The drones, though damaged by the blast, still emitted a faint, almost imperceptible energy field. The Elysian symbols etched into the walls, dormant for centuries, began to glow softly near her, pulsing with a gentle, rhythmic light. Back in the present, Nalan subtly examined the power conduits feeding the holding cell's energy bars. He recognized the basic principles of the system, a standard human design but modified with Krill tech. He reached out, feigning to steady himself, and brushed his fingers against a junction box. A slight pressure, a carefully placed short circuit. It wouldn't disable the system entirely, but it might create a momentary disruption, a window of opportunity. Suddenly, the Krill leader barked an order, the sound amplified by a crude vocal modulator. The guttural words were imbued with frustration. The leader turned to another Krill and gesticulated wildly. Nolan strained to understand. Data pad, locate, priority. A cold dread washed over Nolan. It wasn't just about the facility's defenses. They were desperate for something specific on that data pad, something more valuable than strategic information. The Krill leader turned back to Nolan, his multifaceted eyes burning with impatience. He barked another order, and two hulking Krill hunters, their exoskeletons gleaming menacingly, approached. They grabbed Nolan roughly, hauling him towards the corridor. The leader pointed towards the ventilation shaft. They dragged him to the narrow opening where he had last seen the data pad explode. The air still crackled with residual energy. The Krill leader shoved Nolan towards the shaft, pressing the muzzle of a plasma rifle against his skull. He gestured emphatically, the message clear. Enter. Flashback. Nova gasped, her eyes fluttering open. The Elysian chamber swam into focus, the glowing symbols resonating with a strange energy. A faint hum filled the air, and she felt a connection to the ancient technology, a whisper of Elysian voices echoing in her mind. Back in the present, Nolan stumbled into the ventilation shaft, pretending to be hesitant. His heart hammered against his ribs, but his mind remained sharp. He scanned the cramped space, noting the layout, the structural supports, the potential weak points. The air was thick with dust and the lingering scent of burnt metal. He ran his hand along the wall, feeling the cold, smooth surface of the ventilation duct. His fingers brushed against something unexpected, a series of interlocking plates, crafted from a material far more advanced than anything he'd seen in the facility's human-built sections. It was Elysian technology, integrated seamlessly into the ventilation system. The shaft wasn't just for air circulation. It had another purpose, a hidden function. Nolan took a deep breath, calculating the angles, the stress points. He knew enough about structural engineering to cause a localized collapse. It was a gamble, but it was his only chance. With a surge of adrenaline, he unleashed a series of precisely placed kicks against the weakened support beams. The metal groaned, protesting under the sudden stress. The ventilation shaft shuddered violently. Dust and debris rained down as sections of the ceiling buckled and collapsed. The Krill hunters roared in surprise, their guttural cries echoing through the confined space. The collapse was partially successful, trapping one of the hunters beneath a pile of twisted metal. But the Krill leader, agile despite his size, managed to scramble back, his multifaceted eyes burning with unbridled rage. He was more determined than ever to capture Nolan alive. Nolan didn't wait to see the full extent of the damage. He plunged deeper into the ventilation system, crawling through the narrow ducts, heading towards the original site of the explosion. It was a desperate gamble, but he hoped that there might be another way out, or at least some useful information to be gleaned from the wreckage. Flashback. Nova focused her mind, channeling her Elysian training. She reached out mentally to the damaged drones, attempting to interface with their systems. The connection was fragile, flickering in and out of existence, but she caught a glimpse of the facility's original purpose, a research station dedicated to studying something. Then a warning flashed through her mind, a desperate plea from the past. Containment breach. Do not open. Back in the present, Nolan reached the destroyed remains of the data pad. The device was a mangled mess of melted circuits and shattered components. Hopeless, he swept his hand across the floor when his fingers brushed against something hard, hidden beneath a layer of debris. He pulled it free, a small, rectangular data chip encased in a protective shell. It was encrypted, but it was intact. A guttural roar echoed through the ventilation shaft. The Krill leader rounded the corner, plasma rifle raised, his face a mask of fury. There was nowhere left to run, but as the Krill leader took aim, Nolan activated the chip. He pressed the activation rune, and a faint pulse of energy surged through the ventilation system, carried along the Elysian conduits. He didn't know what it would do, but it was his last hope. The activated chip sang its dissonant song, a high-frequency whine that clawed at the edges of hearing. Lights in the ventilation system spasmed, flickering erratically as the frequency surged through the ancient wiring, and a low hum resonated through the facility, vibrating in Nalan's teeth. The Krill leader recoiled, his chitinous mandibles clicking in what sounded like agony. He clutched at his head, the segmented plates of his skull flexing under the pressure of his massive hand. A guttural roar ripped from his throat, a sound of pure, unadulterated rage. "Subdue him. Signal or no, he dies." Nalan seized the opportunity. The Krill leader's disorientation was a window, a split-second lapse in the hunter's otherwise relentless focus. He twisted, throwing his weight against the nearest hunter, the one who'd been foolish enough to approach within arm's reach. The Krill stumbled, momentarily off balance, and Nalan ripped the energy rifle from his grasp, the weapon's cold polymer surprisingly familiar in his hands. He spun, bringing the butt of the rifle crashing against the Krill's faceplate. The chitin cracked, a spiderweb of fractures appearing across its surface, and the hunter collapsed. Nalan, weaponless no more, turned to face his remaining attacker. He knew he couldn't win a straight fight. Krill were engineered for war, their bodies dense with muscle and bone, their reflexes honed by generations of combat. But humans had something else: knowledge. He knew the precise location of every nerve cluster, every vulnerable joint. He dodged a swipe of the Krill's clawed hand, the razor-sharp talons whistling past his ear. He ducked under another blow, his muscles screaming in protest, and grabbed the Krill's arm, using his weight and leverage to force the hunter off balance. He twisted, applying pressure to the joint, feeling the satisfying pop as the Krill's arm dislocated. The hunter shrieked, a high-pitched keening that echoed through the ventilation shaft. Then a flicker at the edge of his awareness, a vision unbidden and intense. Nova, her eyes wide with a sudden, inexplicable understanding, saw robed Elysian figures in a vast, central chamber. They were activating a similar device, a crystalline structure humming with power, the same ethereal energy field emanating from it, bathing everything in its pale blue light. Nalan snapped back to the present, his breath ragged. The Krill hunter was still struggling, but his movements were sluggish, hampered by the dislocated arm. Nalan didn't hesitate. He brought the energy rifle down again, this time aiming for the base of the skull. The hunter went limp. He grabbed the hunter's weapon and fired a concentrated burst into a weakened section of the ventilation shaft. The metal buckled, groaning under the force of the blast, and a section of the ceiling collapsed, creating a larger opening. A searing pain lanced across his shoulder. The Krill leader had recovered. He'd fired, the energy bolt narrowly missing Nalan's head. Nalan stumbled back, retreating deeper into the shaft as more of the structure gave way. The humming intensified, growing louder, more insistent. Sections of the ventilation system began to glow, an ethereal blue light pulsing beneath the grime and corrosion. The light emanated from integrated Elysian tech, circuits and conduits that had lain dormant for centuries, now awakening with a purpose. Nalan scrambled through the debris, pushing himself toward the original explosion site, the place where he destroyed the data pad. He reached the ruined console, the scorched metal still radiating heat. His fingers brushed against something solid, a seam in the wall he hadn't noticed before. He pried at it, his nails tearing, and a hidden panel slid open, revealing a larger chamber beyond. He could hear the Krill leader approaching, his heavy footfalls echoing through the ventilation shaft. The humming sound was now deafening, a bone-jarring resonance that seemed to vibrate in his very soul. He could hear the Krill leader's ragged breathing, the sound of his labored gasps. The Krill leader seemed increasingly distressed, his guttural roars now tinged with a note of fear. Another vision slammed into Nova. this one stronger, more insistent than before. She felt a surge of power, an overwhelming sense of urgency, a primal need to protect something within the facility, to shield it from an outside threat. It was ancient, powerful, and vulnerable. Nalan didn't have time to think. He threw himself through the opening into the hidden chamber. The chamber was vast, filled with inactive Elysian defense systems, their crystalline components dull and lifeless. Strange, geometric structures lined the walls, their surfaces covered in intricate carvings. The Krill leader burst into the chamber, his energy rifle raised. But he stopped short, his mandibles twitching, his eyes wide with something that Nalan could only interpret as terror. He stared at something behind Nalan, something he couldn't yet see. Suddenly, a section of the chamber wall dissolved, the metal shimmering like water before disappearing entirely. A wave of pure energy washed over Nalan, tingling his skin, filling his senses with an almost unbearable intensity. Through the dissolving wall, Nalan saw them. A group of heavily armored figures, unlike anything he had ever seen before. They emerged with weapons drawn, weapons that pulsed with raw power. The armor was a dark, obsidian metal, intricately designed and pulsating with an inner light. They were silent, efficient, deadly. These new figures engaged the Krill hunters who had followed their leader, killing them swiftly and efficiently. Their weapons fired bolts of pure energy, vaporizing the Krill with horrifying ease. The Krill leader, realizing the futility of resistance, attempted to flee, but he was too slow. The armored figures moved with impossible speed, surrounding him, disarming him, and pinning him to the ground. The leader of the armored figures turned toward Nalan. His visor glowed with an intense blue light. He spoke, his voice synthesized but clear in perfect galactic standard. "Human, the Elysian failsafe is active. Prepare for integration." The armored figure, impossibly still amidst the lingering smoke and the Krill leader's cooling corpse, finally moved. A device on his wrist, metallic and glinting, slid forward, emitting a beam of pale blue light that washed over Nalan. The light felt cold, invasive, probing. "Who are you?" Nalan demanded, his voice tight with suppressed panic. He strained against the Krill restraints, the alien metal biting into his wrists. "What do you mean, integration?" He received no answer, only the hum of the scanning device. With unsettling efficiency, two more armored figures moved in, their movements synchronized, almost robotic. They clamped restraints around Nalan's ankles, the metal cold against his skin. Flashback. Nova gasped, clutching her head. The world swam, then sharpened into a corridor of polished obsidian. Robed Elysian figures, faces obscured by deep cowls, moved with purpose. One held a device, intricate and glowing with inner light. As they activated it, Nova saw a symbol flash, a circle bisected by a jagged line, radiating outwards. The symbol resonated deep within her, a forgotten echo in her very being. Back in the ruined chamber, Nalan tested the restraints. He pulled, twisted, slammed his shoulder against the unyielding metal. They were far beyond anything the Krill had used, a seamless, adaptive weave that tightened with every movement. He was trapped. The armored leader, his voice a synthesized monotone, finally spoke. "Subject displays a dormant Elysian component. Integration is required for activation." Nalan's blood ran cold. Integration. It wasn't for his benefit, it was weaponization. They intended to use him. He had to buy himself some time. With a surge of adrenaline, he kicked out, sending a chunk of debris from the collapsed ventilation shaft hurtling towards the armored figures. It was a desperate, clumsy move, born of pure panic. The figures didn't even flinch. The debris bounced harmlessly off their armored chests. Two more figures moved in, securing additional restraints, their movements precise and unhurried, a testament to their advanced technology. Flashback. The obsidian corridor dissolved into a vast chamber. In the center, a structure of crystalline pillars pulsed with a soft, inner light. The Elysian figures worked around it, their movements reverent. Nova focused, recognizing the specific formation of the crystals a resonance matrix designed for. What? Back in the chamber, Nalan's eyes darted around, searching for any advantage. He noticed the crystalline structures embedded in the walls, remnants of the Elysian facility. As the armored figures moved closer, he saw a faint shimmer, a subtle resonance between their presence and the crystals themselves. It was almost imperceptible, but it was there. The armored figures began connecting Nalan to the crystalline structures. Glowing cables, thin as fiber optics but radiating intense heat, snaked out from their armor, attaching to ports on his wrists, ankles, and temples. Nova, aboard her heavily modified scout ship Stormbird, gripped the controls, her fingers tightening. The visions were becoming clearer, sharper, filled with a sense of urgency. She knew, with a certainty that bypassed logic, that Nalan was in mortal danger. She punched in the coordinates for the Elysian facility, the Stormbird leaping into hyperspace. Nalan felt a jolt of agony as the cables activated. The crystalline structures in the chamber began to glow brighter, bathing the room in an eerie, pulsating light. It felt like his very being was being ripped apart, reassembled, forced into a new, horrifying configuration. He thrashed against the restraints, desperate to sever the cables, but they were impervious to his struggles. The heat intensified, burning into his skin. Flashback. Ancient Elysian texts flickered in Nova's mind, fragmented verses echoing across millennia. Should the corruption from within awaken, a failsafe shall be triggered, to sever the connection, to preserve the whole. Back in the present, the armored figures ignored Nalan's struggles, their focus absolute. They were mere conduits, instruments in a process far beyond his comprehension. The final key is prepared, the armored leader stated, his voice devoid of emotion. Integration sequence commencing. The Stormbird screamed out of hyperspace, sensors blaring, high-energy readings, abnormal activity within the facility. Nova slammed the controls, her heart pounding. She was almost there. The crystalline structures pulsed in unison, the light intensifying, the hum growing into a deafening roar. The integration process had reached a critical stage. Muscles screamed, lungs burned, but through the haze of agony, a strange clarity bloomed. Nalan, writhing against the restraints, noticed his vision sharpening, snapping into a hyper-focus he'd never known. The crystalline structures surrounding him, once a blur of alien geometry, now perseveranced into intricate lattices, each facet shimmering with internal light, each edge humming with barely perceptible energy. The air itself seemed to vibrate with a frequency just beyond human perception, a visual symphony of raw power. Above, the armored leader, motionless until now, tilted its helmeted head. Energy readings fluctuating, a synthesized voice rasped, devoid of emotion. Elysian component, becoming more active, maintained suppression. Far above, beyond the oppressive darkness of the facility, Nova's ship, the Starfire, tore through the upper atmosphere. Friction painted the hull in fiery hues of orange and red, a screaming defiance against the alien world. Alarms blared in the cockpit, but Nova ignored them, her gaze fixed on the targeting system. Multiple energy signatures pulsed on the display, clustered around a central location. "Got you," she murmured, her fingers dancing across the controls. Flashback. A robed Elysian figure, face etched with ancient wisdom, stood before a shimmering crystalline array. These structures amplify our abilities, allowing us to interface with the very fabric of reality. But be warned, child, the figure cautioned, their purity is paramount. Corruption can twist their power, turning them into instruments of darkness. Back in the present, Nalan's mind raced. The robed figure, the warning, it all clicked into place. These weren't just Elysian structures, they were being corrupted. The armored figures weren't harnessing the power, they were perverting it. He clenched his teeth, focusing every ounce of his will, every fragment of his engineering knowledge on the crystalline structures. He imagined the flow of energy, the resonant frequencies, the points of vulnerability. He visualized a cascade failure, a controlled overload that would disrupt the entire system. The armored figures reacted instantly. A surge of energy slammed into Nalan, a searing wave that threatened to overwhelm his consciousness. His muscles spasmed, his vision blurred, but he held on, refusing to yield. Outside, the facility's defenses sprang to life. Automated turrets, sleek and deadly, swiveled, their energy cannons spitting bolts of plasma that streaked across the sky towards the Starfare. Nova banked hard, the Starfare responding to her touch with impossible grace. She weaved through the barrage, using the jagged terrain as cover, her shields shimmering under the relentless assault. Flashback, Nova, younger, fiercer, stood before a training matrix, Elysian symbols swirling around her. Her instructor's voice echoed, in times of corruption, remember the failsafe, the sequence. It will sever the connection, restore balance. Back in the present, Nalan's body convulsed violently. The energy intensified, pushing him to the brink of oblivion. Then for a fleeting instant, his vision cleared. He saw through the armored leader's visor, past the metallic shell, and into the face beneath. It wasn't Elysian. It wasn't even humanoid. The face was insectal, with multifaceted eyes that glowed with cold, calculating intelligence. The armored figures weren't just corrupting the tech. They were being controlled. The Starfare screamed through the last line of defense, breaching the facility's outer perimeter. Nova slammed the landing gear down, the ship shuddering as it came to a halt near the main entrance. Inside, the armored figures adjusted the energy flow, focusing their efforts on Nalan. Tendrils of energy snaked across his skin, attempting to burrow into his mind, to fully integrate him into their system. But in that brief glimpse, in that moment of clarity, Nalan had seen something else, something that sent a chill down his spine. He recognized a biosignature, a familiar pattern woven into the energy matrix. Krill. It was a Krill biosignature. The chamber doors hissed open, and Nova burst in, weapons drawn, her face a mask of unbreakable spirit. The armored figures reacted instantly. The integration process faltered, the tendrils of energy retracting as they turned their attention to the new threat. The crystalline structures, now destabilized and overloaded, emitted a high-pitched whine, a sound that resonated deep within the bones, a prelude to chaos. The armored leader raised a hand. From the shadows, more armored figures emerged, their weapons trained on Nova, forming an impenetrable barrier between her and Nalan. "Nova!" Nalan shouted, his voice strained, barely audible above the whine. "They're Krill puppets, the crystals. They're unstable." Nova spun, Elysian blades flashing, deflecting a barrage of energy pulses. Each parry sent jolts up her arm, the armored figures relentless. Her shots found purchase, carving chunks from their plating, but the Krill-controlled automatons kept coming, their movements stiff, inhumanly precise. The figures were too numerous, their armor too resilient. Nalan, pain lancing through his ribs, squeezed his eyes shut, trying to focus. The room hummed with a dissonant energy, a chorus of vibrations that felt. Wrong, he strained, pushing past the agony, reaching for the pattern, the key. There. A resonance frequency, a subtle oscillation within the armored figure's control systems, a shared vulnerability. Nova, 7.3 MHz, input it. He gasped, his voice ragged. Nova, trusting his instincts, tapped the frequency into her wrist-mounted weapon. A high-pitched whine emanated from her blade as she swung. The nearest armored figure spasmed, its movement stuttering, its weapon arm twitching erratically. Feedback. It was working. She pressed the advantage, carving through the momentarily paralyzed figures. 1, 2, 3. A path cleared, a desperate scramble toward Nalan. A piercing shriek cut through the chaos. The armored leader, standing at the crystalline nexus, emitted a high-pitched signal. Instantly, the remaining figures snapped back to attention, their movements regaining their chilling precision. They surged forward, weapons blazing. Nalan's gaze darted to the crystals. They were pulsing now, a slow, rhythmic throb growing in intensity, in sync with the armored leader's signal. The resonance was increasing. His mind flashed back. Ancient Elysian texts, scrolls filled with warnings about the dangers of crystalline technology. The crystals sing a song of power, a symphony of destruction. They can transmit energy across the void, binding worlds or shattering them. The texts described them as planetary conduits, capable of weaponizing a world. Back in the present, the horrifying truth slammed into Nalan with the force of a physical blow. The Krill weren't just mining the crystals, they were weaponizing the entire planet. Nova reached him, slicing through his restraints with a surge blade. "We need to move." "No, we have to disable the crystals," Nalan shouted, his voice strained. "They're going to use this planet as a weapon." A searing beam of energy erupted from the central crystal, lancing across the chamber. It struck Nova's prosthetic wing. She cried out, collapsing, clutching the damaged limb. Sparks flew and smoke billowed from the intricate mechanisms. The energy had overloaded the system, disrupting its neural interface. The armored leader advanced, its heavy boots clanking on the metal floor. Cracks spiderwebbed across its helmet, revealing glimpses of the grotesque krill face beneath. Chitinous plates, mandibles clicking, eyes burning with cold, alien malice. It raised its weapon, targeting Nova. Adrenaline surged through Nalan, overriding the pain, fueling a desperate surge of energy. He lunged forward, tackling the armored leader with a roar. As they grappled, images flooded Nalan's mind, a chaotic torrent of alien memories. He saw a world choked by dust and ash, its resources depleted, its skies perpetually dark. The Krill homeworld, a dying planet. They were desperate, driven by the primal need to survive. Other worlds, other races, were simply resources to be exploited. He focused his will, channeling the chaotic energy of the crystals, trying to disrupt the leader's connection to the network. He visualized the Krill homeworld, the desperation, the hunger, and forced that knowledge into the leader's mind. The armored leader staggered, its movements faltering, its grip loosening. But the crystals, they pulsed brighter, faster. The entire chamber began to shake. Cracks snaked across the walls and floor, widening with each pulse. Nalan realized his mistake. He hadn't just destabilized the connection, he triggered a failsafe. The crystals were overloading, reaching critical mass. Planetary detonation imminent. The armored leader, regaining control, shoved Nalan aside with brutal force. It activated a device on its wrist, a small metallic cylinder with glowing runes, the final sequence. Nova, struggling to rise, saw the activation. Her eyes widened in horror. "Nalan, they've armed it, we have minutes." "Nalan, they've armed it, we have minutes." Ignoring the searing pain in his side, Nalan hooked an arm under Nova's shoulder, hauling her away from the shuddering console. Sparks showered from her damaged prosthetic wing, the rhythmic crackle a frantic counterpoint to the groaning of the crystalline chamber. "Come on, now." He wrestled her through the narrow doorway, the rockcrete walls already beginning to fracture. Behind them, the chamber pulsed with an unnatural light. Nova gasped, stumbling. He didn't stop, didn't dare. Reaching a junction in the tunnel, Nalan saw the emergency exit blocked by a power conduit ripped from the wall. He spared a glance at Nova's sparking wing, then back at the conduit. An idea, desperate and reckless, formed in his mind. "Nova, give me your wing." She recoiled. "What? Are you insane? Just trust me." He grabbed the damaged prosthetic, ignoring her hiss of pain. Tracing the energy flow with his fingertips, he rerouted the sputtering power from the damaged circuits of her wing to the severed conduit. Blue light flared, arcing across the gap. The emergency exit hissed open, revealing a narrow passage. They scrambled through as the chamber behind them imploded, a shockwave of displaced air slamming into their backs. The tunnel bucked and swayed, threatening to collapse. They didn't stop running until they reached a reinforced observation platform overlooking the crystalline plains. From their precarious vantage point, They watched as the entire planet began to glow. Crystalline energy, once contained within the planet's core, surged outward, forming a visible energy field that shimmered and crackled across the alien sky. It was beautiful, terrifying, and utterly unstoppable. Nolan pulled out a makeshift scanner cobbled together from salvaged tech. The readings flickered wildly. Damn it! The detonation sequence is locked. We can't shut it down conventionally. Nova stared at the swirling energy field, her expression grim. The Elysian texts, they spoke of the crystals not just as a power source but as a means of amplification and transmission, a way to send energy across vast distances. The realization hit Nolan like a physical blow. They're not just destroying the planet. They're turning it into a weapon. A weapon aimed at who? Nolan asked. Nova's gaze hardened. The Alliance, key worlds like Cygnus VII, Kepler 186f, even Earth. The Krill planned to use the planetary detonation to target key planets in the newly formed alliance, incinerating them with a focused beam of crystalline energy. It was an act of galactic terrorism on an unimaginable scale. But if the crystals were transmitting energy, could that energy be redirected? Nolan's mind raced, piecing together the possibilities. The destabilized crystal network. Maybe we can use it, send a counter-frequency that will neutralize the weapon. Nova shook her head. Impossible. The frequency would have to be broadcast from the heart of the crystal network right before detonation. It's suicide. Nolan stared at the swirling energy, his mind already formulating a plan. Maybe not. I have an idea. He described a plan involving a modified Elysian shuttle, retrofitted with a high-frequency disruptor based on the crystalline resonance. It won't be easy. The shuttle will have to navigate the unstable crystal network while withstanding the planetary detonation's initial shockwave. Nova looked at her damaged wing, her face etched with willpower. I'll pilot it. My knowledge of Elysian tech is crucial. Besides, she said wryly, I owe them a few. Nolan studied her damaged prosthetic. I might be able to do something about that. He spent the next few minutes modifying Nova's damaged wing, cannibalizing parts from the shuttle's energy shield. He wired the prosthetic to act as a localized energy deflector, a last-ditch barrier against the detonation's fury. It's not much, but it might buy us a few seconds. As he worked, a fragmented image flashed through Nolan's mind. The Krill leader's desperate plea, the holographic projections of their resource-depleted homeworld, a world on the brink of ecological collapse. He saw the parched landscapes, the skeletal remains of long-dead forests, the desperate faces of a dying people. Nolan paused, his hand still on Nova's prosthetic. He understood with a chilling clarity the Krill's motivations. They weren't just conquerors, they were refugees, driven by the primal need to survive, even at the cost of others. He met Nova's gaze, his voice low. We're not just stopping a weapon, Nova. We're trying to save a species, perhaps against their will. She didn't reply, but her expression softened. They both knew the odds were stacked against them, but they also knew they couldn't stand by and watch the Krill obliterate entire worlds. They boarded the modified Elysian shuttle, a patchwork of human ingenuity and Elysian elegance. Nolan strapped himself into the co-pilot's seat, his heart pounding in his chest. He set the shuttle on a collision course with the central crystal, intending to deploy the disruptor at the last possible moment. Nova engaged the shuttle's stealth systems, the hum of the engines barely audible above the crackling energy outside. They plunged into the heart of the crystalline storm, hoping to avoid detection by any remaining Krill forces. The shuttle plunged into the heart of the crystal network, its passage a silent ripple in a sea of light. Crystalline structures, luminous and ethereal, stretched in every direction, forming a labyrinth of glowing geometry. Violet, cyan, and emerald light pulsed from the formations, casting the shuttle in an ever-shifting kaleidoscope of color. Nova's hands danced over the controls, her movements fluid and precise. Decades of Elysian flight training sang in her blood. She threaded the needle between colossal crystal spires, exploiting microcurrents and gravitational anomalies only an Elysian could sense. Elysian flight patterns are proving useful, she said, her voice calm despite the chaotic environment. The Krill seemed to have overlooked the intricacies of our techniques. Nolan, hunched over his console, his brow furrowed in concentration, monitored the energy levels. Alarms blinked insistently. "The energy fluctuations are intensifying," he announced, his voice tight. "We're nearing the core, but the instability is off the charts. I'm detecting localized collapses. We need to be quick." A flicker on the main screen, a brief, fragmented transmission. Nolan replayed it, isolating the audio. Krill voices, harsh and guttural, filled the shuttle. Rations depleted. 7th cycle. Homeworld, starvation imminent. Dominion worlds, only option. The transmission ended abruptly. Nolan leaned back, his expression troubled. "I've been studying the intercepted Krill communications," he said, his voice thoughtful. "They're not just bloodthirsty conquerors. Their homeworld is dying. They're facing starvation." Nova scoffed, her grip tightening on the controls as she executed a sharp turn, narrowly avoiding a collision with a massive crystal shard. "Desperate or not, Nolan, they've slaughtered billions. They show no mercy. Don't try to excuse their brutality." "I'm not excusing it," Nolan countered, "but understanding their motives might give us an edge. They're not acting out of pure malice, but out of desperation." A piercing alarm blared through the shuttle. A crimson blip appeared on the radar. A Krill patrol drone directly ahead, guarding a critical junction in the crystal network. "We have company," Nova said grimly. "Time for a little Elysian improvisation." She slammed the throttle forward, sending the shuttle hurtling towards the drone. Instead of engaging directly, she initiated a series of daring evasive maneuvers, weaving through the crystal structures with impossible precision. The drone, sluggish and predictable, struggled to keep up. Nova used the crystal formations as cover, playing a deadly game of hide and seek. "I need a distraction," Nova called out. "Something to mask our energy signature." Nolan's fingers flew across his console. "I might have something. I can modify the Elysian shuttle's cloaking system to emit a frequency that mimics the crystal resonance. It'll be a tight fit, but it might just work." He rerouted power conduits, bypassed safety protocols, and hotwired the cloaking matrix. Sparks flew, and the shuttle shuddered as the system strained to accommodate the modifications. "Cloaking sequence initiated," Nolan announced, his voice strained. "Wish me luck." The shuttle shimmered, blending seamlessly with the surrounding crystal environment. The Krill drone, its sensors confused, drifted past, oblivious to their presence. "It worked," Nova breathed, relief flooding her voice. "You're a miracle worker, Nolan." "Don't celebrate yet," Nolan warned. "That modification took a heavy toll on the shuttle's power levels. I had to reroute energy from the shields." Nova's face hardened. "How heavy?" "They're almost non-existent," Nolan admitted, grimacing. "We're vulnerable to any kind of energy discharge now, especially that detonation we're trying to prevent." As if on cue, the crystal network began to violently shake. The luminous structures pulsed with an erratic, feverish light. The air crackled with static energy. "The detonation sequence is accelerating," Nolan said, his voice urgent. "We're running out of time." He recalibrated the frequency disruptor, his fingers moving with practiced speed. "Disruptor ready. I'll transmit the counter frequency as soon as we reach the core." Nova, her mind focused, braced herself against the intensifying crystal energy. Her prosthetic wing hummed with power, an energy shield flickering into existence around the shuttle, a fragile barrier against the impending cataclysm. They arrived at the central crystal, a colossal, pulsating structure that dominated the network. Nolan initiated the disruptor. "Transmitting counter frequency," he announced, his voice tight with anticipation. The disruptor hummed, bathing the crystal in a wave of energy, but nothing happened. The crystal continued to pulse, The network continued to shake. "It's not working," Nolan said, his voice tinged with disbelief. "The detonation sequence is still active." "There's a failsafe," Nova said, her eyes scanning the readings. "An energy barrier is protecting the central crystal from outside interference. It's preventing the transmission of the counter frequency." "Where's it coming from?" Nolan asked, his mind racing. "The energy barrier is powered by a secondary crystal lattice," Nova explained, "hidden deep within the network. We need to disable it." Nolan swore under his breath. "That'll take us even further into this unstable mess." Nova's voice was grim. "Our time is running out, Nolan. The primary detonation sequence is nearing completion, and our shields, they won't last much longer." Nolan stared at the readings, his face etched with commitment. He knew the odds were stacked against them. He knew that one wrong move could mean their destruction. But he also knew that the fate of countless lives rested on their shoulders. "We have no choice," he said, his voice resolute. "Plot a course for the secondary crystal lattice. Let's go." The shuttle shuddered, a low groan resonating through its frame as Nova forced it deeper into the crystal network. Jagged, translucent spires scraped against the hull, their edges glowing with an inner light that pulsed in sync with the network's unseen rhythms. The air hummed with an almost palpable energy. "Shields are dropping, Nolan." Nova's voice was tight, focused. "We're not going to last long at this rate." Nolan wrestled with the power conduits, his fingers dancing across the interface. "Rerouting power from life support to the shields. It'll be uncomfortable, but it'll buy us some time." He grimaced, the temperature inside the shuttle already beginning to climb. The recycled air tasted thin and metallic. Suddenly, a series of sharp, high-pitched tones pierced the relative quiet. "Network defense system activating," Nova announced grimly. "Crystalline sentinels, dead ahead." Before them, the tunnel shimmered, and from the crystalline walls, constructs of pure energy and solidified light materialized. They resembled predatory birds of prey, their wings outstretched, their eyes glowing with cold, calculating intelligence. Energy beams lanced out, striking the shuttle's shields with blinding flashes of light. "Shields down to 60%. Nolan shouted, sweat beading on his forehead. "Those beams are eating through them like acid." "Damn it," Nova hissed. "They're attuned to Elysian biosignatures. They're prioritizing me." Despite the increased targeting, Nova's hands moved with blurring speed across the controls. The shuttle twisted and turned, narrowly avoiding the Sentinel's attacks. Each evasion was a dance on the edge of disaster, the crystal walls looming inches away. Flashback. A young Nova sat at the feet of an elder, the crystalline city of her ancestors shimmering around them. "The network is our lifeblood, child," the elder's voice echoed. "It is the song of our people, the memory of our ancestors. Every crystal, every node is connected. To harm one is to harm all." "Nolan, I have an idea, but you're not going to like it," Nolan said, his voice grim. "If we destroy the secondary lattice, it could destabilize the entire network." He paused, the weight of his words heavy in the cramped shuttle. "That could have catastrophic consequences for the Elysian civilization. I don't want to be responsible for that." Nova's expression hardened. "I understand the risk, Nolan, but if we don't stop the Krill detonation, there won't be an Elysian civilization to worry about. The network can heal, but the Krill will leave nothing but ashes. We have to prioritize." Ahead, the tunnel opened into a vast cavern, dominated by a structure of unimaginable scale, the secondary lattice. A massive, interwoven network of crystals, it pulsed with raw energy, its surface crawling with light. But it wasn't just the lattice they had to worry about. "Krill defense drones," Nova said, her voice grim. "They've fortified the area. It's a nearly impenetrable barrier." Dozens of sleek black drones swarmed around the lattice, their weapons trained on any potential approach. Energy shields shimmered, creating a layered defense that seemed impossible to breach. Nolan stared at the impossible odds, his mind racing. "I have a plan," he said finally, a spark of commitment in his eyes. It's crazy, but it might work. We use the sentinels against the Krill, overload their targeting systems, create a distraction. It's our only chance. Nova nodded, her teeth gritted. All right, let's do it. She initiated the plan, deliberately maneuvering the shuttle into the sentinels' line of fire. The crystalline constructs shrieked, their energy beams intensifying, focused solely on the Elysian shuttle. Nolan worked feverishly at the controls, rerouting power, modifying targeting algorithms. Here we go, he muttered. Time to confuse some robots. As the sentinels fired, Nolan unleashed his modifications. The sentinels' targeting system sputtered, confused by the conflicting signals. Their energy beams wavered, then began to arc wildly, striking the Krill drones instead. It's working, Nolan exclaimed. Keep them busy, Nova. Nova pushed the shuttle through the chaos, dodging energy blasts from both the sentinels and the Krill drones. Explosions rocked the cavern, showering the shuttle with crystal shards and molten metal. The air crackled with energy. She destroyed the remaining drones. I'm in position, Nolan said, his voice strained. Charging the modified energy pulse. This is it. He took a deep breath, his finger hovering over the firing trigger. Just as he was about to unleash the pulse, a holographic message flickered to life on the shuttle's console. The image of a Krill leader, his face etched with desperation, filled the small space. Please, the Krill leader pleaded, his voice raspy and weak. You must stop. We know what you're planning. Don't destroy the lattice, our homeworld. It's dying. We need the crystals to survive. We promise a future alliance. Just, please. The transmission ended abruptly, the Krill leader's image vanishing as his ship exploded in a distant flash of light. Nova turned to Nolan, her expression implacable. Destroy the lattice, Nolan, now. We cannot trust the Krill. Nolan stared at the firing trigger, his hand frozen. The Krill leader's desperate plea echoed in his mind. He thought of the dying homeworld, the countless lives that hung in the balance. But he also saw Nova's face, the pain and drive in her eyes. He knew what the Krill had done, what they were capable of. He hesitated, torn between saving countless lives and risking the destruction of the Elysian network. Nolan's hand trembled above the activation rune. Doubt, a cold serpent, coiled in his gut. Could he truly do this? Could he unleash such power even against those who deserved it? He glanced at Nova, her gaze steady, unwavering. In her eyes he saw not just encouragement but understanding. She knew the weight of this decision, the burden of leadership. He took a breath, the air thin and metallic, and slammed his palm down. A pulse of pure energy erupted from the modified Elysian core, a lance of light piercing the Krill command ship and impacting the secondary lattice with brutal force. The lattice shimmered, pulsed, then fractured like glass struck by a sonic hammer. A chain reaction, visible even from this distance, ripped through the Krill network, a cascade of collapsing energy fields and overloaded conduits. On every monitor, the Krill offensive stalled, their formations dissolving into disarray. The crystal network, their lifeblood, their weapon, was failing. Beside him, the Elysian network flickered, lines of light dimming and sputtering. Damage sustained, Nova reported, her voice tight, but contained, repairable with effort. The moment of opportunity had arrived. Humanity, alongside its newfound allies the Krasari, the Zith, and a dozen others, launched its final counter-offensive. Fighters screamed through the void, bombers unleashed payloads of antimatter warheads, and capital ships exchanged volleys of devastating fire. Nolan, piloting a heavily modified interceptor, led the charge. He weaved through the chaos, exploiting the Krill's weakened formations, his every move calculated, precise. Humanity's strategic advantage, born from desperation and ingenuity, was on full display. Then he activated the Krill leader's comm channel, broadcasting on every frequency. His voice, amplified and translated into the Krill's guttural language, echoed across the battlefield. Krill warriors, he began, his tone firm but filled with compassion, this war is over. Your homeworld is dying. Your leaders have led you astray. We offer you a chance to surrender. Lay down your weapons and we will provide aid, shelter, and a future. The effect was immediate and profound. Krill fighters broke formation, their movements erratic, confused. Some turned their weapons on each other. Others simply drifted, lost and directionless. Disillusionment spread like wildfire through their ranks, fueled by desperation and the promise of salvation. Chaos erupted within the Krill fleet, their command structure collapsing under the weight of mass defections. With the Krill forces in disarray, the tide turned decisively. Humanity and its allies pressed their advantage, driving the remaining Krill forces back, system by system, until they were expelled from human space entirely. The Krill invasion, a nightmare that had threatened to consume the galaxy, was over. In the aftermath, Nalin and Nova, along with representatives from every major race, stood before the Galactic Assembly, the holographic chamber filled with a tense, expectant silence. Nalin activated the projector, displaying irrefutable evidence of the Council's conspiracy. Intercepted communications, encrypted data logs, and eyewitness accounts, all painting a damning picture of betrayal and deceit. The evidence revealed a horrifying truth. The Council, driven by greed and a lust for power, had deliberately weakened humanity's defenses, creating an opening for the Krill invasion. Their goal was to seize human technology and resources, consolidating their control over the galaxy. The revelation sparked outrage that reverberated throughout the galactic community. Races that had long suffered under the Council's oppressive rule rose up in rebellion. Protests turned into riots, riots into open warfare. The Council's authority crumbled, their power base collapsing under the weight of their own treachery. Within months, the Council was overthrown, its members arrested and brought to justice. A new Galactic Council was formed, more representative, more inclusive, and more committed to the principles of fairness and equality. Humanity, having proven its resilience and its commitment to peace, was granted a seat at the table, playing a key role in shaping the galaxy's future. Nova, hailed as a hero by her people and by countless others, used her newfound influence to advocate for the restoration of the Elysian network, ensuring its benefits were shared by all. She championed the rights of marginalized species, fighting for a future where every voice was heard and every life valued. Nalin, his heart heavy with the memory of the war but filled with a newfound sense of purpose, dedicated himself to helping the Krill rebuild their civilization. He honored the promise he had made on the battlefield, sending aid ships, engineers, and scientists to their dying homeworld. He worked tirelessly to find them a new home, a place where they could rebuild their society and find redemption. Years later, Nalin and Nova stood side by side on the bridge of a human vessel, gazing out at a newly terraformed world. Below them, Krill colonists worked alongside human engineers, building a new city, a testament to the power of compassion and the promise of a better future. The sun set, casting long shadows across the landscape, painting the sky in hues of orange and gold. "We did it," Nova said, her voice soft, her hand resting on Nalin's arm. "We showed them what humanity is capable of." Nalin smiled, his eyes filled with hope. "Not just humanity, Nova, all of us, together." He looked out at the horizon at the dawn of a new era,